Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Allan Thomas is a Hawaiian-based singer, songwriter, guitarist, recording artist, and producer. Originally from Manhattan and raised in Brooklyn and Long Island, New York, at age 12, Allan sang in an a cappella group, released his first single in 1966, followed by his first album, 1971's A Picture. A move to Malibu, California in the late 70s found Allan working as a staff songwriter for a major label, as well as teaching music. In 1983, Mr. Thomas relocated to Kauai, Hawaii, where he has resided ever since, saying he's never looking back. Beginning in 1989, Allan has released 6 more studio albums, all issued on his own record label, Black Bamboo Recordings. His most recent and ambitious album being 2021's The Journey. Mr. Thomas has also self-produced and recorded his last 3 albums. Throw in a stint as a DJ with his own show and an autobiography, Talking Stories, and you almost get a complete picture. I'll leave it to Allan to fill in any gaps.
Great.
Well, welcome, Allan.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for
joining.
Amazing,
great group of artists that you already interviewed.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I thought about maybe we could do this from outside. You know, it's so beautiful.
It really is. I live near the jungle, actually, in a stream. It's so beautiful here.
Yeah, I know when I talked to Patrick Cockett, he even walked out there with his,
he did.
phone. Yeah, and you saw that in That's what I think of when I think of Hawaii, that kind of landscape like that. Well, take us back to the beginning.
I was born in Manhattan. My mom took the subway to Manhattan to have me for some reason.
Okay.
I guess because, good hospitals. And born in Manhattan, moving between Brooklyn and Long Island. We moved 13 times by the time I was 17.
Yep.
So I just got used to making new friends and starting all over a lot. But somehow around 12 years old, 1960 or so, I got the bug to sing in a cappella vocal groups.
Okay.
And some of my buddies and I started an a cappella group, a cappella vocal group, and that's how it all started for me.
Oh, okay. So you had that bug from an early age. And
very early. Well, my mom said I was singing along to Sam Cooke on the radio when I was 8. So I had good taste right from the start. And I still do. In my set, I do 2 in my performance set that I'm still performing quite regularly, and I still do a couple of Sam Cooke songs.
Oh, which ones are those?
Well, I do I was born by the river in a little tent. So that one. And I also do the one that he did a duo with Lou Rawls, Bringing On Home to Me.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Yeah. Love those. I do Curtis Mayfield and I do a lot of the black R&B kind of music. Really inspired me as a youth. That really got me. It touched me in some way. And that's what got me into it, really.
Okay. Well, do you recall growing up hearing music being played in the house?
Yeah. My parents had some records, but it was like Perry Como, it was like the ballad singers of the day, Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, Andy Williams. I actually really got into Johnny Mathis at a very early age too, singing all those ballads. I'm still a ballad singer. I love ballads. But I mean, I just sit in the basement, of my parents' house, and I would it started out with Sam Cooke, Johnny Mathis and those guys, and just sing every single lick, note for note.
Yeah.
And then it went on to, before the Beatles even, then it was, it was Chuck Jackson, and then it became like Marvin Gaye and the Temptations, and the Motown music, and then it was Stax, all the really cool, Otis Redding, and somehow that music really, really inspired me to sing.
Yeah.
I didn't become a songwriter till 1967, and I was like 19.
Yeah.
And then I had a broken heart, and I found, release and relief in writing songs.
That's where they come from a lot of times, it's the pain.
Yeah, inspiration starts like that. And I'm still doing it. So I've written 299 songs. I just counted them up the other day.
Whoa.
And released, I'm working on my 8th album right now. I'm in 3 songs into the 8th album.
Oh, okay.
It's been a long road, let me tell you. But a joyous road.
There you go. When can we look for that release of that 8th album?
I don't know. I'll probably release singles before I release the album. It's going to take me a couple of years. I'm a slow, I started out writing 12 songs a year when I was in my youth in 67 for the first 10 years. But now I write 1, 2, or 3. And I usually write an instrumental too. So some of my albums, I started out on my 2nd album and all the way through the other ones, writing at least 1 instrumental for the album. And I like that idea. And now, well, on my 2018 album, 2 Sides to Every Story, I had 7 instrumentals and 8 vocals. So I really love that, and I have some awesome musicians. So
yeah, we'll talk about
yeah.
them coming up. But yeah, that's almost like a 50-50. Yeah, almost a balance.
Yeah,
there.
2 sides to every story. So that was part of the idea of it. There's instrumentals and there's vocals, and plus it was happy songs, sad songs. I'm trying to get a lot of humor in my music nowadays. Lyrics. Yeah,
a good balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what age did you start playing guitar?
I got my first guitar when I was 12.
Okay.
And I really, the only thing I played for the first 5 years was Peter Gunn. Dun 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 dun. And I never really got guitar lessons, or I did get guitar lessons, and I got 1 guitar lesson from a buddy, and that's what he taught me. That's all I played. I didn't really do too much. But then I think I got more serious when the Beatles came out, and then I think I was 17, and when I was 17, I really got serious. I started practicing and learning all kinds of songs, and that's what got me going. But 2 years later, I started writing songs, and then, I just could take a subway from Brooklyn into Manhattan. I started playing the Village, the coffee houses.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and that was amazing.
You remember one of the first live shows that you attended, concerts?
Attended. Wow. I do remember one really amazing one that had an effect on me for years later. I guess 1965 or 66. I was wearing my polka dot shirt, my Beatle boots, and my bell-bottom pants, and I went to see. It was this concert that had a lot of artists on it. It was in Long Island, and one of the artists was the Hollies.
Oh.
And there I heard Graham Nash's voice, Bus Stop and all those hits. But who would know that, that was what, 65, 75, 85, 97, 30 years later, I would be singing with Graham Nash. But that's the one that I remember. I mean, there was some New York groups, the Vagrants, and, maybe groups the Mountain, rock groups that were on that show, but that was part of the English Invasion. And I remember that one really well.
Yeah, great harmonies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, talking about your early single, before that, how did you come to meet and sign a recording contract with Huey Moe?
Huey Moe, what a character. He was such a character. I somehow had a manager who managed a hotel in Manhattan, right on 45th Street. And he was friends with the manager of B.J. Thomas, no relation.
Okay.
B.J. Thomas had a hit at the time. It was a Hank Williams song. I think it was "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry." I can't remember if that might have been the original hit. And this guy, this Texas character named Huey P. Moe, Meaux, the Crazy Cajun, they called him. He had worked with Johnny Winter and Freddie Fender later, and BJ Thomas. So when BJ came to town to do some gigs, my manager at the time introduced me to Huey, and I just basically had a guitar in the hotel room and played a couple of songs. And he said, "Would your parents mind if we flew you to Houston, Texas to record?" And I was 17 or 18. And I asked my parents, and they said, "Sure," because my mom really was inspired that I was a singer. She was a singer when she was very, very young on the radio. And so, long story short, they flew me to Houston, Texas to record with a white band and a black band. The white band was BJ Thomas's band, the Triumphs, and the black band was a band called TV and the Tribesmen. And I wasn't a songwriter at the time. They had written songs for me by Mark Sharon, the guy who wrote for BJ, and different songs. And I recorded 9 sides, 9 singles. And then they ended up signing me to a very famous New York City label called Scepter Records. And Scepter, had the Shirelles, Dionne Warwick, Chuck Jackson, as I mentioned before. And my record, there were 2 singles. One of them got released on Scepter Records, "Summertime Monkey Shine."
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was so cool. I listened to that recently. It was kind of a mind blower. It's, again, it's really before the Beatles became gigantic. And, it's kind of R&B-ish, really, with the horns and really rocking stuff. I don't know if you heard any of that, but it's trippy.
Yes, I have. And then Jealousy, Little Green
Jealousy,
Man.
Little Green Man. Amazing. What a time, and so that was just quite an experience. And then I came back to New York, and through my manager, I would sit in these New York City clubs, right, the Wagon Wheel, and right next to the Peppermint Lounge in Manhattan. And I spent the summer of my 17th or 18th birthday in Manhattan, just living on very little and singing with the horn bands at these 2 clubs. They let me sing with them, traveling horn bands, and quite an amazing experience. I'd sing like Wilson Pickett songs and My Girl, The Temptations. It's a pretty amazing time.
Well, you were, in Greenwich Village. Did you see my chat with Carolyn Hester?
No, I saw that you did it. I haven't listened to it yet, but she was there.
Yeah. Did you cross paths?
Not with her. Not with her, with a lot of other people in the village. And that was when I was 19 and 20. I started singing in the village and playing at the Gaslight and the Bitter End and all those really cool places. And, you could hear Bill Evans, the jazz pianist, for like a cup of coffee up at the top of the village gate. But I ended up opening for Weather Report. And I used a lot of major 7th chords, minor 7th chords. And I wasn't really a folk. I had an acoustic guitar, but I wasn't really a folky. I didn't do a lot of folk songs because I had more of still a blues R&B, and then it started turning into a more jazz-ish kind of groove. So I had a booking agent, and they got me gigs opening for Cannonball Adderley and Weather Report and these blues people. It was so cool.
Wow. Well, talk about any memories, any particular shows opening for those artists that you remember that stand out.
Oh, yeah. I was opening. Well, actually, I was supposed to open for Les McCann.
Okay.
And in Boulder, Colorado, and I went to see Cannonball and his quintet in Denver. And I was in the audience, and I already knew the club owner. Marvelous Marv's was the club, and it was a big club. And the opening act bombed for Cannonball. And I'm sitting in the audience, and the owner comes up to me and says, "Look, can you open for Cannonball Adderley?" I said, "Well, I'm supposed to open for Les McCann." goes, I'll take care of it. I go, okay. So then it was going to be another 5 nights opening for Cannonball Adderley Quintet. And I did. And it was a small club, and Cannonball and Nat and the band befriended me. I was 23, 24 years old at the time, and they just took me under their wing and let me hang out in their dressing room, which was actually one of the hotel rooms. And it was such a mind-blowing experience because I was into jazz at a very early age. I'm 23, 24. I listened to Coltrane and Miles Davis, but Cannonball was my favorite. And here I am opening for him. But what happened was, in one particular moment up in the dressing room, Les McCann shows up. And they're friends with Cannonball. And Cannonball says, Allan, I want you to play that song Comfort for Les McCann. And I'm standing, this close to Cannonball and this close to Les McCann. And I'm singing the song to them. And Les McCann just can't believe it. And Cannonball's just like smiling. See, I told you. And then Les McCann goes, are you the guy that was supposed to open for me in Boulder? I said, yeah. And he kind of did a funny kind of smile. I didn't know what was up. And later I found out that I was blackballed from any other gigs in Denver or Boulder because the biggest booking agent guy, because the guy who was supposed to set it up for me to be okay to open for Cannonball and not for Les, never did it. And I was blackballed. I couldn't get any more gigs. And I had some things coming up. So that was it. But it was worth it. I got to say, it was worth it.
Not your fault. Yeah. Wow.
No. And it led to some amazing experiences in Los Angeles with Cannonball Adderley.
Oh, wow.
Amazing experiences. Recording and performing and live and improvisational vocals with Cannonball Adderley.
Exactly. And like you said, he's taking you under his wing at an early age.
Yeah, his manager, John Levy, who actually had managed Billie Holiday, they wanted to manage me and produce me. But it was one of the biggest faux pas of my life, biggest regrets, really. But I had a meditation teacher, a guru at the time, and I said, I need to wait for permission. And I waited like nine months, and they offered me a contract. Who knows what direction my life would have taken, but you can't tell anyway, so it was all good. But in the end, they passed, and then soon after, Cannonball passed away. So I always look back at that and wonder, what if? But it's all good.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you're right, and you learn from those experiences, and you got to say chalk them up, to.
Yeah, I have a song lyric. It's actually called "Live and Don't Learn." It's
like
about a character who just doesn't get it. I haven't made it to music. I haven't made music for it yet, but it's the lyric. It's already done, and it's just this guy who just refuses to get it.
He
Live and don't learn. That's me. There's a prime example of it.
Right. That could almost be a theme for America too.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, exactly. Well, moving forward a little bit, the singer-songwriter period of the early 70s has got to be one of the best times for me, and I think for, a lot of musicians, but especially the kind of music that I like, favorite era. And that's how I first found out about your 71 album, A Picture. And you recorded that on Sire
Records, big New York City label.
Yeah.
I had been.
How you got the contract? Do you remember how?
Yes, I do, because I had been performing at a really, really cool club in Manhattan, in the Village, and the Gaslight, and it was the home. Dylan had played there maybe 6-8 years before I got there, so he was in the early 60s. I was like 68, 69, 70, and I was performing there. I had a gig, and And this guy was in the audience, and he came up and introduced himself, David Wilkes, and he worked at Sire Records, and he said, we would like to sign you to a recording contract. And there was so many, folk artists and artists at the time, all trying to get record deals. I wasn't trying, but I got one, and I signed with Sire Records. I had original music, and they wanted me to record my original songs, and it was such a boon, such amazing luck, whatever, karma. I don't know what you'd call it, but I just felt so blessed, and went into the studio. So they said, do you want to use these studio guys? We could get the best studio guys in New York City. But I had already traveled the country hitchhiking around Ohio and California and Colorado. And I had met these musicians that I had did gigs with. And I just said, no, I want you to fly these guys in. We'll stay in my mom's basement. And then we'll go to Manhattan every day and rehearse at this rehearsal space. And then we'll record. And they did. They rented me a car. They flew these guys in. They did all of that. And we recorded for whatever it was, a week or so, rehearsed for 5 or 6 days, and then recorded. And then they embellished that with some studio cats, on vibes, and Ellie Greenwich on backing vocals. She was a famous backing singer, and the record came out. And I toured around the country, and I had a booking agent. And that's how, I met Cannonball, and through, so many amazing things happened because I did have an album out, and it wasn't folk music, it wasn't really folk, it was singer-songwriter. Look, James Taylor's album came out the same year, God bless him, and, I was right in the middle of all that,
Well, how was it working with Richard Goddard on that?
It was amazing. He was such a cool guy. And he's still around. I think he started a distribution company called, I can't remember it now, Orchard Distribution. He was amazing. I mean, he was already a famous songwriter. He'd written hits, and he was in the Strangeloves, a group that had hits, and he was just so cool. I was just such a novice. I had never really, I recorded before when I was 16, 17, but this was different. And he had he was just so kind and generous. And, they bought me as, what do you want? They said for my advance, and I just said, well, I could use a really nice acoustic guitar. So they had a really beautiful handmade Gurian guitar made in Manhattan down in the Village, and given to me, and a little tape recorder, little cassette tape recorder. And that was my advance, and I would practice to the tracks. And it was rough, it was rough because I just didn't originally, wearing headphones and singing to the track, because we recorded, I'm playing acoustic guitar, the other guys are in the studio, we're recording our tracks, but I didn't sing live except for 2 songs with acoustic guitar, which came out great. So it was a learning experience, man. It put me through a lot of changes until I kind of got it. But he actually had to the headphones weren't working, and my intonation wasn't great. And they put speakers up right behind the microphone, and then it worked for me.
And it worked.
Yeah, and it worked. So, but I learned so much.
A little trial and error,
Yeah. You take a novice, and then we're recording a real 12 songs or whatever it was, Such an amazing experience. And in the studio at the time, Stevie Wonder was down in the basement, and it was an old converted church. It was a Media Sound on 57th Street on the west side. And I met I met Stevie, and his producer engineers, Bob Margouleff and Malcolm Cecil, took a liking to me, and they invited me later on in England and in Los Angeles to Stevie Wonder sessions.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, that was quite an experience. And those guys became friends, especially Malcolm Cecil, who they produced some of the biggest Stevie Wonder albums at the time. And they were really kind to me. And I met Richie Havens in that same studio, and I ended up opening Richie Havens' shows a couple of times. And he was just a beautiful man, beautiful singer-songwriter. And, he was a black guy, like in the folk vein, playing that Guild acoustic guitar. And he ended up playing at Woodstock. This is,
That's right.
before all that.
Yeah.
Such a great guy. I mean, I have so many great memories of just great musicians and the great people that they were,
Yeah. You're really blessed to be able to play with so many and experience all that too.
And it just kept getting better as the years went by. Who knew? Who knew,
Right. You have some good karma. Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to mention a couple of 3 tracks off there and get your 2 cents or maybe backstory or inspiration.
Yeah.
One of them that I really like is In the Rain.
Oh, yeah. In the Rain, that was 1967. It's one of the first 10 songs I ever wrote. And I loved the rain. I still love the rain. I've written other songs about the rain, Rapture in the Rain on one of my albums. But I remember borrowing my father's 1960 something Dodge car and going to the Corvette's parking lot in Brooklyn that overlooked the Verrazano Bridge, in the rain, and writing that song. And it was such a great experience. And then I think that song is one of my top 3 on the album as well, because the vocal just was so believable, and I felt the song. And of course, the musicians backing me were just phenomenal. Jack Lee on everything, and nylon string guitar. And yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, and you turn a positive spin on that. So many people, when it's a rainy day, it's gloomy, it's depressed,
Yeah,
all that. But I like the other side because I like rainy days myself, so I can appreciate
yeah,
that.
that's cool.
Yeah, I definitely can. Well, and then I like the jazzy feel of Let It Flow. I like that. Yeah. That's another.
Yeah, that wasn't a very big when I came up with that title, I think it was just starting to become used in the lexicon of music and lyrics. Let it flow, let it flow. And yeah, it was about this girl that I had met, and like many great songs inspired by beautiful women. What can I say? But soon after that, I don't know, I went to jail. I did go to jail for almost a year and a half.
That was one of my questions from your.
Yeah. I had gone to a Rascals concert in Long Island with some of my buddies, and one of my Brooklyn friends, he would come out to Long Island from Brooklyn. He'd bring with him like little $7 bags of weed to pay for the gas, But this was 1967 or 66 or 67, and it was highly frowned upon in those days. And we were at this club, we were listening to the Rascals, and some guy comes up to me. He was actually a junkie that I knew, but I didn't know anything about heroin. And he said, "Hey, you know where I can get some heroin?" And I went, "What?" No. He goes, "Well, you know where I can get some weed?" And I go, "Well, Rodney's got some weed." And so he introduces me to this guy. This guy comes up and then says, "Where's Rodney?" "Over there." And about 11 months later, knocking on my door, and they start to take my father away. "Are you Allan Thomas?" They go, "No, I'm Carl Thomas." And he goes, "Alan's sleeping upstairs," and they come and take me away. And long story short, because I'd been kind of Kolohe here is a rascal. When you say someone's a Kolohe, they're kind of a rascal. So me and some of my friends, we got in trouble. I had a previous couple of arrests, was hanging out at the candy store and getting arrested, and then I stole a battery out of a car, me and a friend, and I got arrested another time. Then I had some tickets. So I had done some stupid kid stuff. I was 17, 18 years old, whatever it was. So when I went before the judge for the sentencing, he said, I was drafted the same day. It was December of 1967. The Vietnam War was going on full blast. And my lawyer said to the judge, "Your Honor, he's been drafted. Here is his draft notice. He said, no, he needs to learn respect for the law. And he gave me 3 years. Gave me 3 years for a conspiracy to sell $7 worth of weed.
Mm.
And now look at what's going on. It's just crazy. But in the end, I did go to jail. I went through 4 or 5 months in prison up in New York State. And then they sent me to a camp, a work camp with 80 guys. And I chopping down trees for the Conservation Department of New York. And I was there altogether 16 months. So I got out like just a couple of weeks before Woodstock. But I couldn't go to Woodstock because I was on parole.
Mm.
So, but I had a gig. Someone got me a gig singing up in the Catskills, you know. And it's just the stories go on and on. You know, I was on a train 75 miles from Woodstock and I just couldn't go. But other things happened that were pretty amazing. So it was all good. It's all good.
Yeah, I gather you lived a very rich life. Yes. Well, one other track I want to mention on there before we move on, Walls.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite songs on that album. It really is. You know, I had a manager for a couple of years there. He was an ex-Rams football player, really, really tough guy. And he managed this woman singer named Lynn Kellogg.
Okay.
And she was the original lead blonde in the play Hair on Broadway. She was the one that wouldn't get naked, but she was really beautiful. And they were lovers, and he managed her. And I met him through my manager in New York City, and I became her rhythm guitar player. And we toured the country, playing in really nice clubs everywhere with horn bands and arrangements. And I was her guitar player. And occasionally I do a TV show and they'd let me do one of my songs. But we had very contentious relationships. And I was like 21 or so. I was kind of young and dumb, you know, and I would say stupid things. And I hurt her feelings one day. And I just remember him getting really angry at me and just telling me off. So I actually wrote the song Walls. It was about a relationship that you just couldn't get over the walls. And I made it so it could be a relationship with a woman, of course. But really, the inspiration was my manager at the time. And not too long after I wrote that, we were playing a club called the Troubadour in Los Angeles. And we were opening for Tiny Tim, you know, the guy who played Through the Tulips. And we were opening for him and this is like, I guess it was like 70, 69, something like that. And I had heard her, we rehearsed for 12 hours a day, I swear. We would rehearse. And somehow I said something dumb to her. I still don't remember what I said to her. I hurt her feelings. And we were due to go and play that night. So I showed up early. No one was in the club except me. And I was upstairs in the green room just waiting to rehearse. And this manager guy, Mal Williams, came in and he said, "You hurt my girlfriend's feelings. You hurt Lynn's feelings." And he kicked me in the throat.
Wow.
He kicked me in the throat. This is an ex-football player. He kicked me in the throat and then jumped on top of me and pulled out a knife and put it on my throat. And at that moment, the sound guy from downstairs knocked on the door and said, "What's going on in there?" And then he put the knife away and said, "Nothing." And that was the closest I came to, you know, actually being killed. But my throat really hurt. And that night I stayed and did the show, played guitar with her. And then I didn't even go back to where all my stuff was. I just left the next day and I hitchhiked up to Oregon and just started a whole new life. That was it for me and him.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, somebody was watching over you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that was a pretty close call there. And
Sound man knocking on the door. That was right.
The Troubadour. Yeah, we played there years later, but it never felt the same, you know.
Yeah.
Troubadour.
Wow. Well, yeah.
Amazing times.
Right. You do have some stories. How did do you remember how the album fared? Did it?
Yeah, it didn't do all that great. Although it opened doors for me. Again, I was able to tour the country and open for Sarah Vaughan and Carmen McRae and all these blues guys, Arthur Crudup, and yeah, Weather Report. Oh, it's amazing opening for Weather Report and Cannonball Adderley. So, it opened the doors for me, and just a great experience. I just played the Village and played all these clubs and had a booking agent. So it was a great thing for me. Didn't do that great. I don't even know what it sold, if it sold anything, but the record cost them, well, this is 1970, 71, cost them $15,000.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, because Cannonball Adderley's manager wanted to buy my contract from Sire Records, and they were just about negotiating to do that. They were talking to each other, how much Cannonball Adderley's people would pay for to get my contract. But in the end, like I said, that all didn't happen. But what did happen was I had living in Oregon with a lady in Southern Oregon in a shack, and Cannonball sent me a letter from Los Angeles. Said, "Hey, we're going to do this concept album. We want you to come and sing on it."
Oh, okay.
And I said, "Okay." So I bought this $65 car that burned a quart of oil every 50 miles, and me and my girlfriend drove down to Los Angeles. The car broke down just before we got into Los Angeles. We made our way there, and then, long story short, Cannonball invited me to a session with his brother, Nat, and the whole band, Roy McCurdy, Airto, the famous Brazilian percussionist. And they were doing the second concept album. The first one they did was they would play all this jazz, and they had this famous DJ from Los Angeles, and he would talk about the first album they did was the Zodiac of the stars or something. It was all about the different signs of the zodiac, and they named each song, Aquarius and Pisces. And the next one they were doing called Soul of the Bible, where they would have a different master. They would talk about Christ, they would talk about Mohammed, they would talk about Buddha, and then the band would just go into a 20-minute song. But on this one, Cannonball and I had a lot of conversations about meditating, because again, at the time I had a guru, and he really enjoyed those conversations with me, talking about meditating. And so when he invited me to the session, he said, "Look, you're going to go in that room over there with the microphone, and we're going to be out here with the band. We're going to play, and then we're going to point to you. And when we point to you, just sing what we have talked about."
Okay.
And I couldn't do it now, but it was George Duke on piano, mainly. George Duke on piano, on an acoustic piano. And then they played for 12, 15 minutes, just wild jazz. And then they pointed to me, and I went, "There's an energy," and I just went off the top of my head. And 4.5 minutes later, the song was done. It was mainly me and George Duke, him playing really cool gospel chords, and Walter Booker on upright bass. The band came in at the beginning, and the band sort of came in at the end. And it was a track they ended up calling "Behold." Behold. And it is on the Cannonball Adderley. Well, it's actually called Cannonball Adderley Presents Nat Adderley Sextet. It's called Soul of the Bible. And it's still there. And and I just received, I get royalties from that.
Yeah.
Not much, but it was like this one came from Spain or somewhere.
Right.
And but I'll never forget that as long as I live, and I could never do that again either.
Yeah.
Improvisational vocal like that.
It's interesting about what you talk about royalties, where they come from. And like you said, Spain, and I've talked to different ones that said, like, I got one from Russia. This song was real popular over there for some reason. Didn't do anything here,
Yeah.
but Yeah, the things, it's just wild. Yeah, yeah.
No, I looked, I get my, quarterly statements, and again, there's like Czechoslovakia and Poland, and it's amazing that the music is out there just traveling around, and
It does travel. It
yeah,
does. Well,
gotta
let
love
me
it.
let me ask you, what did you do? What kept you busy during the mid '70s?
Well, I had met through the meditation group a beautiful English girl, Carol Cook, and she was in the band. We had a 56-piece band, um, and we played prisons, and we played big festivals for our teacher, and it was Blue Aquarius actually was the band, and that was Kevin.
Kevin Dempsey. Kevin Dempsey.
Yes,
Yep.
he was in the band as well, and his girlfriend at the time. So
Okay.
amazing. They were from England, and the band was from everywhere in the world. And actually, I remember that same story too. That Quincy Jones and came to see us play. But anyway, she was in the band. She went back to England. I followed her to England, and I spent 9 months or 11 months in England, traveling around. And then we got married in England. So Carol Cook. Then we came back, and we ended up living in Malibu in a really 210 square foot shack on Point Dune. 500 yards, maybe less, from Bob Dylan's house.
Is that right?
Yeah, just down the street. And I was hoping some of his, mana, some of his
Yeah.
juice
Five.
come my way. I'm not sure if it ever did, but I was
Maybe.
but Malibu, such a beautiful time. So, we ended up being a songwriting duo and a performing duo. So we'd perform in all the clubs in LA, and we ended up getting a songwriting contract from what was then ABC Music, which became MCA Music, but it was also it was a part of ABC Records, and ABC Records, ABC Dunhill.
Yes.
And so we had a year contract with them writing songs, which is what we love to do. And we would go in to do our demos at 8:30 in the morning, driving up the Malibu coast towards Hollywood to Beverly Hills, Beverly Glen, Hollywood. And we would as we were getting ready to do our demos, Steely Dan and the Crusaders would be coming out of the studio from all night sessions. Because they recorded, both of those guys recorded for ABC. It was such a heady time, and then, during the Grammys, we would get albums for $1. All you had to do was pay $1, fill out your list. And if you were a member of the Grammys, which we were, we'd get all these albums. Then I found out about Steely Dan. I found out about the Doobie Brothers and all these just phenomenal groups that were, popular at the time. And it was so cool to get those albums and really check out that music. And I became a huge Steely Dan fan.
Yeah.
And which later, sort of ended up working with Donald Fagen. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. Kind of like the Graham Nash thing,
Yeah.
Graham Nash ended up singing on 3 songs on 3 different albums. But I was in my studio here on Kauai, I guess 2005. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I get a call on the phone, and someone said, "Hey, I had a radio show at the time, and I would play Steely Dan on every show. It was a 2-hour show. It's the show with no name. I called it the show with no shame." But I could play anything I wanted. I mean, really, jazz, blues, classical, anything. And I did that for 6.5 years. So I get a call on the phone. This New York guy, "Hey, it's Donald Fagen. I want to come over and see your studio." And I'm, get the hell out of here, I go. But I had heard he might be on the island, and a friend of mine, this real estate agent guy, knew him. So okay.
Maybe, yeah.
He said, "No, it's really Donald." And I said, "Well, okay." And he was staying down the street from me. He said, "I want to come over and see your studio." I said, "Come on." In walks Donald Fagen into my little, 500 square foot cottage. And I had a really good microphone. I had really good speakers. And, I had I guess I don't even remember. I had an iMac or something. He goes, play me something. So I was already working on my third or fourth album. But I didn't want to play him that. I was producing some Hawaiian music, and I just played him some of that. And he kind of bopped around. He was like, oh, yeah, it's pretty cool. It sounds good. I'm going to have my engineer call you. And he just left. Okay. I get a call from an engineer, another New York guy, and he goes, yeah, what kind of stuff you got over there, you know? And I go, well, I got this microphone and that preamp, and I had a Neve preamp, and the Blue Sky speakers, and because this is what you need, take this down. And he gives me a list, like you need this U87 microphone, you got to have a distressor compressor, you got to have, this kind of monitor, you got to have this kind of computer. And he called me back when you got it. And because Donald was already on the island to record. And what happened was the people who owned the studio where he was going to record and the people who owned the building where he was recording in the studio had a fight. And now Donald couldn't record. And he was there to record 4 tracks for his second solo album, Morph the Cat. The tracks were done. He just needed to record vocals. And they had no studio. So I added it up. It was $25,000 worth of equipment. Wow. And I said, man, I don't have 25. I got a credit card. I don't have that much on it. And I talked to a friend of mine and his wife, and she said, I'll back you as long as you pay me back. And then I found out through another friend how much money I could make, $17,000 from Warner Brothers by renting this stuff out. Yeah. And I'll figure out the rest. And I did it. Mm-hmm. So next thing you know, all the stuff comes in, the engineer comes in, and we have this giant dojo that was where the studio was. And they took all the equipment out, brought all my stuff in. But then we had no, it was a terrible room. It just had all this echo. And so we put out the call. We need blankets. We need pillows. We need to dampen this room. And we tried to build this little place for Donald to sing his vocals. But it wasn't, and Donald was doing it with us, me and the engineer and Donald, crawling around, going up on ladders, putting up blankets, and it was terrible. So finally we put out the call, and my friend Neil, we need a carpenter to come in here and give us a 12 by 12 room with blankets. And they did that. And then we worked for 6 weeks, 6 hours a day, for 6 weeks, 6 days a week on doing vocals for Donald Fagen's album. And I was the second engineer. It was my studio, but the main guy, they flew in, and I was just, I wasn't pressing buttons. I was just there. I was making coffee, and you guys need anything? And just sitting there, like the fly on the wall. It was so fun. And it took a while. Donald hadn't been recording in a couple of years. And it took him a while to really, maybe 2 weeks, to really get where he wanted to be. And then he was doing his thing, and it was just insane fun. Yeah. And he invited me to his birthday party. It was Todd Rundgren, him, 4 other people. Just hanging out. Wow. And then he did a concert as a benefit for the local school, and invited me to play rhythm guitar. Yeah. So now I'm playing rhythm guitar and singing backup vocal. And they made the mistake. He said, "Who wants to sing backup vocal?" "Oh, I'll sing backup vocals." Made the mistake of saying, "I will sing backup." It was with me and Todd Rundgren's wife, Michelle, and someone else. We decided to also sing backup vocals on the concert. And I never sweat so hard learning those. We're at Todd Rundgren's house. Donald's on piano. We're standing around the piano. He's teaching us the parts to Third World Man. And these are jazz harmonies. It's not like doo-wop, It's way more difficult. And I'll never forget, because he's going, "No, Allan, that's not it." I'm like, I'm just going to die right there. Here is how it goes, And I went, okay. And I taped everything on a little tape recorder. And then we did the concert, and it was just insane, And I know we did, I think we did Black Friday, because I already knew the chords. I already had been performing solo Black Friday, Do It Again. And we did Third World Man, besides other songs, Anyway.
Oh, Yeah, you run in some really pretty interesting company and famous as well. Yeah. You touched on when you talked about, I was going to ask you about the DJing. That has always been my dream job.
Really?
Yes, to DJ my own show, to DJ my own, be the program director and to play what I want. Yeah.
1997 to 2003, I did that. And Graham Nash came on one of my shows.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
performed the song that I wrote for David Crosby. It's called The Navigator.
Yeah.
I tuned some guitars for David and Graham at a concert here. And I ended up with the list of tunings, altered tunings that David gave me. And I wrote a song called The Navigator about my life, a friend of mine's life who sailed around the world. It was kind of a combination, and David Crosby, who's a sailor. And Graham sang with me on that song. And when I recorded it with Mike Shipley as the producer, and that was the beginning. I mean, he also lived here at the time, part-time. He would come back and forth. Just a few miles away, he lived up in the Wainiha Valley. And so that was the beginning of our professional relationship. And he said, anytime you need me, Allan, just let me know. So we did that song. We did another song and another album. And then a famous local surfer, Andy Irons, who passed away 10 years ago, I wrote an homage to him and ended up getting David Crosby and Graham Nash to sing backup vocals. They were both on the island at the same time. And we went up to a friend's studio. I didn't have to record it or produce it. And I just hung out with them singing backup on, and I ended up having David and Graham. It's called The Longest Ride. And that might have been the last thing we ever recorded together, because soon afterwards they kind of split company, David and Graham.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And then David passing away, when was it? What, this year or last
A year ago or so, I think. Or less.
Yeah, it hasn't. I don't think it's been a whole year. Yeah, you're right. I could look that up, but well, talk about backtracking a little bit.
Yeah.
What prompted the move to Hawaii in '83?
Well, I had a girlfriend at the time who had 3 children, 2 of which were like 3 and 6 years old. And they moved from Idaho down into my 210 square foot cottage in Malibu.
Okay.
All right. And they were wild Indians, you could say. They were just wild. And my birthday was coming up, and I said, I have a friend on Kauai. I already been to the Big Island in 1980 because my best buddy and guitar player and songwriting partner, Brian Kessler, moved to Oahu. And I went there in 1980 and stayed for 6 months on the Big Island and just loved Hawaii, loved it, had gigs, and, everything was going my way. And I came back to Malibu, and then I met this woman from Idaho, and we were living together, and it was just nuts. And I just said, I need a break. I'm going to Kauai this time because I know someone that lives there. And I went to Kauai, and once again, everything opened up for me, and I had a gig right immediately when I got there, and a cool place to live, way out towards the end of the road here on the North Shore. And I ended up extending my trip, and my girlfriend with her kids stayed in my Malibu house. Everything was fine. I flew her out for a 10-day visit, just me and her kids ended up staying with this woman who lived on Bob Dylan's property in what do they call those? Gypsy wagon on Bob Dylan's property. So she was babysitting the kids. My girlfriend came in, and this place is like heaven. And she just, at one point where she was here for 10 days, she said, man, I'd love to live here. And I said, let's just do it.
Yeah.
And so she went back, and they called her Rocket Rhonda because she could do anything. And in 30 days, she sublet my place, packed up I had 2 cars at the time, her car, her kids, and moved to Kauai. So that was 1983 and 40 years ago. And, there are lots of stories that happened between now and then, obviously. And she passed away of leukemia in 1988. But I ended up staying, and the island has a way. If it wants you here, you stay here. You find work. You find your place. You find your friends. If not, the opposite happens, and you're gone somewhere else. But the island really opened its arms to me, and still has, and has provided me with everything. I mean, I wasn't a surfer at the time. I wasn't a windsurfer at the time. I loved the water. I was a scuba diver, a snorkeler, but I ended up, after 3 years, I ended up becoming a windsurfer. And then after 6 years, I became a surfer, and I started surfing at 43. And that's not, I'm a musician. Didn't have the body style for surfing, but I was determined. I got to say one thing about myself. Once I decide to do something, I'm just going to do it. It took me years, but I'm now still surfing. I'm 75. I surf in the winter every day, and I windsurf all summer. And I think that is part of the recipe for my good health. And whatever blessings and grace comes along with that, or I don't know, but Hawaii and the water and those challenges of the waves here, I don't know, it really helps a man become a man. You challenge yourself. So I don't know, it's just really been.
Which do you prefer, windsurfing?
Well, I'm better at windsurfing because you don't have to jump up on a, you don't have to lay down in front of a 10-foot face and jump up on your board. As you get older, you're slower. Let's just face it.
Right.
So I'm the oldest guy out there at a couple of spots that I surf, but I get a lot of respect because I'm still there, and guys go, man, you could still surf at 75. I hope I can do that. And I'm not deep in the lineup, it's all the young bucks, the great girls. There's here on Kauai, there's at least 3 people, women right now, that are on the world tour. This is one of the greatest places to surf, to learn how to surf. But windsurfing, you just lift up your sail, you step on your board, you're going. And then you may fall, but you get up on your board. And I windsurf waves. I windsurf serious waves, and 38 years now, and never missed a season.
Yeah.
And I wrote a song about it. One of the songs is called Wind Rider on the Island album. And then recently on the Two Sides to Every Story album is a song called Good to Go, which is about surfing, windsurfing, and relationships. So put them all together.
All together. Well, yeah, that's interesting because I know Patrick does that too.
Oh yeah, Patrick. He's one of the longtime surfers from Kauai. He was surfing way back before I ever got here, and he's an amazing guy, amazing singer, songwriter. Lucky I just got to work with him and produce one song with him, playing guitar and singing. Yeah, Kauai. I love Kauai, and been fortunate that the island keeps providing me with work. I perform one night a week, sometimes 2, at a venue here on the North Shore. And I have had teaching gigs, where I teach guitar and vocal and songwriting, and produce artists. Some people come to my studio, not a lot, just enough, to keep things going.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were still teaching.
I teach, yeah. I at one point had 22 students at one point, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And, from 9 years old to whatever, 6 people in their 60s. I've had 2 really cool students that you might know. Cheech of Cheech and Chong.
Never heard of you. Yes, I have.
When I lived in Malibu, Cheech became my student. He heard me and my wife and Brian playing at an opening of a restaurant right down the street from me by Zuma Beach. And I ended up going to his house every week for a while and teaching him. And then back about 10 years ago, I ended up teaching Pierce Brosnan, 007. Yeah, and one of his sons, I think it was Paris. Pretty sure it was Paris, but it was 10 years ago. My memory isn't all that great, but he is great. And he would come to my my album release parties in very small venues, and when I'd see him at the restaurant or whatever, he'd buy my CD, and he's just a really cool guy. He has a place here. He has a place in Malibu, and he's one of the nicest guys. So we had some really cool lessons.
Well, how is Cheech? What did you teach him, guitar, or what did you
Yeah,
teach?
I taught him
Okay.
some guitar,
How
and
proficient?
it was after.
Uh-huh.
But I don't remember much. I don't remember much, but I know that we had some lessons there, and he was the funniest guy and really cool. I haven't seen him since then. It's been 45 years, whatever. But I do remember he was cool, and he lived in a really cool place along the Malibu coast up north.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've talked a lot of the questions that I had coming up. You've already kind of covered those, talking about Graham Nash, David Crosby. Oh, by the way, January 18th of this year is when David passed.
Oh,
Yeah, so it hadn't even been a
oh
year yet.
yes, hasn't been a year. I did tune guitars for him at a
Mhm.
concert here. It was David and Graham. And the opening act was Russ Kunkel's ex-wife. Gonna take a lot of love. What is her name? I just forgot it for the moment.
A lot of love.
Yeah, a lot of love, and she worked with Neil Young. Please help me.
Who is
Nicolette
that?
Larson.
Yes, Nicolette Larson.
Nicolette Larson. So
Right.
she was the opening act. Graham and David were the guitar players. Well, they were their own act, and they asked me would I tune guitars for them, and I did. And I told you I ended up with the list of open tunings, but Nicolette was in the back. She was practicing this song, Mexican Divorce, and it was an old Drifter song, and Roy Cooder recorded it as well. And I said to Graham, man, I know that song. And I hear her practicing backstage, and I'm like, started singing the backup vocals, and she looked at me, and Graham said, yeah, why don't you sing, Allan, with her on stage? When I go, she goes, okay. And then, but there was one part I just couldn't get, it was like, and then Graham said, here's how it goes. And he showed me the vocal part, and I got it. And then I went up stage and sang backup vocals with her on that song, Mexican Divorce. And then they did the concert. What was the question? What was leading up to that? Did you ask me something about David or Graham or?
Oh, just work that you just worked together with them.
Yeah.
And there, the connection that you made with them. And I guess with Graham,
Oh, here. So David at one point said, there is a shell here called the Sunrise Shell. It kind of looks like the Shell gas station emblem.
Yeah.
But it's way more beautiful. It's very rare, very rare. And a lot of women here wear them as jewelry, necklaces, and it's called a Sunrise Shell. And David said, oh, man, I never found a Sunrise Shell. I keep looking, but I had a real knack with finding them, and I would dive for them out at where I lived. And I had a stash, and I would give to my lady friends and family. And so I ended up giving one to David, and had my then girlfriend at the time, who's a jeweler, make a hoop for it. And he wore it, and he told me, and his wife told me, that he never took it off.
Wow.
For years, 20, 25 years. And then when Graham ended up helping those guys do their box set, and they had a David Crosby box set, and you open up the liner notes in the box set, and there's him wearing the necklace, the Sunrise Shell. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. A little aside. But he would come to Kauai, and sometimes he would, Allan, I need a guitar to borrow. Graham's left me with this guitar, and its action is terrible. Could I borrow your Collings? And I have a really good Collings acoustic guitar from Austin, Texas. And I would never, ever loan my guitar to anybody. But I would loan it to David Crosby. And he said he wrote some songs on it. And we would get together every now and again, like at a friend's beach house, and play each other songs. I'll never forget it, just playing each other's songs on the beach. and I'm playing him songs that on tunings that he showed me and songs that I read. Because I spent about 15 years after that concert working on altered tunings. My next couple of albums had pretty much all altered tunings, original music, original songs. And because I'd known about altered tunings since the 60s, but I didn't really spend much time in them. But after that night at the concert with those lists, then I just dove into it. And, you know, there's such a plethora of things you can do with open tunings. Joni Mitchell, she was basically an open tuning master, and she played in 52 different open tunings. Because, you know, at one point, I guess she had polio or something like that. And she couldn't really play a lot of chords where it's like, you know, these kind of chords are really difficult. But with open tunings, you could play 2-finger, 3-finger, or just bar, 1 bar. And that's what I read about her. And so the open tunings just opened up a whole musical world for me. And yeah. I still perform some of those. You know, I mean, you got to retune your guitar, but I pretty much have it down, you know, and you have a tuner on your guitar these days. But that was quite a moment, you know, getting those tunings.
Like on the Two Sides to Every Story, found it interesting. Another connection back to Patrick, the slack key, you know, on the instrumental. And I had to ask about that.
Yes. Yeah. Altered tunings and slack key tunings is the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
The same thing. So, you know, and like Patrick told the story of, you know, how the Spanish cowboys came here and they had these ukuleles, and then they brought some guitars, but the Hawaiians didn't know how to tune them. They made their own tunings, C tunings, D tunings, and in Europe at the same time. In Europe at the same time, they had their own open D tunings and all kinds of tunings. Really rich
heritage and
treasure chest of possibility.
I think I remember telling him too that a lot of British musicians couldn't afford a guitar. They started out on the ukulele too, you know, learning, you know, the Arthur Godfrey School of guitar. Yeah. Well, one we didn't talk about was Mike. Well, you briefly mentioned, I think, Mike Shipley.
Mike Shipley,
you know, a heavyweight in recording industry. Well, you know, he worked with a veritable who's who of recording artists. How was it working with him?
Well, first of all, he came here to Kauai to get away from the music business just for short periods. He had done Shania Twain's giant selling albums, Faith Hill, AC/DC he worked on as a young man, Joni Mitchell. I mean, really, you know, he was one of the top 10 guys. So many people's albums. But he came, you know, an Australian guy. He came, but he had been living in California, LA, working in LA, and he just came here for vacations. And I met him through a mutual friend, Chaz Sanford, a Nashville singer-songwriter, and we would have dinners together and hang out. It was just friends. And then I would show him my new songs like The Navigator.
Yeah.
And Homeland and all these different songs. He said, Al, why don't we do an album together while I'm on Kauai? And at the time we had ADATs. We're really the first home digital recorders that were like $3,000. And I had one, and I had other friends that had one. So I said, well, okay, you know, we'll do it. So we would just, we set it up in my house, and we would record tracks. You know, first he would create some kind of a drum loop, and then I would record my acoustic guitar, and then we would have my best buddy, Michael Ruff, who is a phenomenal keyboard player and singer-songwriter, who played on my last 7 albums and lives here on Kauai now. He would do his parts, and my buddy Brian Kessler would play, and we would just do tracks, and he would work on them and produce them and engineer them. And we worked on it for a year, actually, off and on, while he was taking breaks from working with Mutt Lange, who was his kind of guru, who was the producer of Shania Twain and Maroon 5 and all these people. And it was such a great experience because he was a master, but he was a buddy. And, we ended up like setting a microphone up in my bathroom for the guitar amp and just hoping it didn't rain, for the vocals. And at one point I was another aside here, but I was Kareem Jabbar's caretaker for 3 years. He was a neighbor of mine up above Secret Beach in Kilauea. And he asked me to caretake for him after the Hurricane Iniki, when he came climbing over the fence. Allan, how's it going? I was like, what? You were alone in the hurricane? And we became friends. And he asked me to take care of his house and pick him up at the airport and stuff like that for a couple of years. And he was the coolest guy. But I had access to his house. And I asked him, do you mind if we record vocals in your house? He goes, no, when he wasn't there, because he'd go back and forth. And so we set up my recording studio. We just move everything to his place, to Kareem's place, which was right next door. And we did vocals there. And Mike Shipley was really just a genius. And, we recorded that album, Coconut Culture album, 1997. It came out. And then the next 2 albums I did, Making Up for Lost Time, he would end up mixing. And then Deep Water, he also mixed. So I had him work with me on 3 albums. And after he passed away, self-inflicted, he passed away. And then I was like, I just didn't know what I was going to do. 2 sides to every story. 2018, it was done. I didn't know who was going to mix it. I tried a couple of different mixes in LA. Wasn't working out. It was so difficult. I didn't know who to trust with mixing my album. I recorded it. I produced it, had all the tracks, had all the great musicians, Steely Dan drummer, Keith Carlock, James Taylor's bassist, Jimmy Johnson, the drummer and the keyboard player from the Yellow Jackets, Russell Ferrante, and William Kennedy on drums on a couple of tracks. The best guys. The music was done. I'm not going to mix it. I'm not a mixer. I can record, I can write, I can produce. I don't want to be, and I pretty much will mix things very closely to what I want, but I need the guy who's been doing it for 35 years to do the final, put the final sheen, whatever it needs, maybe it needs a little work on the kick drum, or it needs a better sound, or the snare drum, just like that, a little bit compression here, not a lot. And I remembered my buddy Paul Northfield, who I knew when he was 19 and just starting out in London as an engineer. He was 19, and he was a good buddy of mine. He's just starting out, and then he moved to Montreal, and he became like the mixer for and co-producer for a group called Rush.
Oh yeah,
a rock trio.
That little small group.
Yeah, and he was their main guy, and he did Roberta Flack and Wilson Pickett, and he became a great engineer. And here it is, like 40 years later. I hadn't seen him in 35 years or so. And I contacted him. I said, man, are you interested in possibly mixing my album up there in Montreal? He goes, send me one of the songs. I sent him one of the songs. And he goes, we can definitely do this. He said, you want to come up here to my house on a lake 50 miles north of Montreal, and we'll mix for a couple of weeks? And I said, yes. And I went up there, and we just hung out, old buddies, with him and his wife, and he mixed the album. That was the 2018 album, which won an award here in Hawaii for Best Engineered Album, of all things. It's one of the ironies of my life. Here I am, a singer, a songwriter, producer, guitar player. I get an engineer's album, and I'm not really an engineer, but I mean, I can do it. But I'm not like the engineers that came up engineering and, using, all the stuff. I'm in the box, computer engineer.
Right.
Whatever, I'll take it.
You'll take it, yeah.
Yeah. And so he ended up mixing that album and a couple of other singles. And when I did my 2021 album, The Journey, this time I didn't have to go to Montreal, I just send him the tracks. We just send tracks back and forth, and then he would send mixes, and I would say yes or no. Could you give me a little more vocal, a little less this? And then he would just give me 3 or 4 tries. Sometimes he got it on the first one, the first mix. I was like, okay, that's it. Sometimes I would say, could you give me a little more of this, less of that? And he would just dial it in. And so now he's mixing 3 songs into my 8th album. And he's got them right now, those 3 songs in Montreal, and he's going to mix them soon. I'll soon start releasing like 1 single at a time. I'm super excited. Just to be alive, is such a blessing at my age, because so many people are passing away or getting super ill.
Yeah,
I'm in really pretty decent health, and to be able to still be making music. I mean, when I started out and made my first demos, it was like an acetate, and then it was 45 RPMs that were released as singles. Then it was an album, then it was cassettes, then it was CDs, then it's downloads, now it's streaming, and I've seen it all. And yet, what blows my mind is that I'm still here doing it.
Right.
And who knew? Who knew?
Right.
So I feel honored and blessed, to have found that at 12 years old. I knew that I wanted to be in music. I was in they had night classes. No, they opened up the schools in Brooklyn at night to get kids off the street. And we would go there to play basketball, or listen to records, or just hang out. And I went to the bathroom at one point. This changed my life. I went to the bathroom at one point. I'm in the bathroom stall, and these 5 Black and Spanish guys come in, this acapella vocal group, and they start singing acapella. And I just got chicken skin. And I went, oh, that's what I want to do. And that's where it all started. Then I started a singing group and blah, 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 went on and that. But my mind is blown that, here I am still doing this. And I thank you so much for, talking to me about all this.
Yeah. It's a blessing. Like I said, I know it has been. You've been in the right place at the right time many times in your life. You hear about so many that had to knock on doors and they get rejected and things. Not that they just fell in your lap, but things you were very fortunate. Let's just say that.
No, it's true. And I never achieved the success of any of my big contemporaries like James Taylor or any of those, Paul Simon, my favorite artists. But it's all good. You know what I mean? It's like I have my fans, I have my music.
Right.
I can go to sleep at night knowing that I've done the best I can do. I'm still at it. It's not terrible music. Some people like it, so I can't complain. It's like, and I don't complain. I feel look, everything happens for a reason. Right. Like one of my songs says, and if that was meant to be, that would have been, and if it wasn't meant to be, that's fine too. Just to find happiness in what you're given. Right. And know that you did the best you could. Look, I'm just doing the best I can. I'm not the greatest writer, songwriter, singer, blah, blah, blah. I'm not. But I have my own little niche there, and I feel comfortable in that. And some people like it. So good enough, good enough. You don't have to take over the world. I feel, and I think about this recently, is that I'm probably not cut out to be super famous, because you got to have, like Tom Petty once said, you got to have rhinoceros skin, and I don't. I'm a sensitive person, and who knows if I would have been able to, take the slings, what do they say, the arrows, just the barbs, all the things that will come with fame, people getting down on you. Maybe I just wouldn't have been able to take that, and probably wouldn't have been, who knows what that would have done to me as an artist.
But yeah, that's the thing, it's not, success shouldn't be measured in, how many gold albums you have and how much money you make and all that. It's like you said, are you comfortable there? Are you where you should be? And you do have some, fans and people that appreciate do you still hear from people that were fans a long time ago?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I heard from a fan and his wife that they heard me in 1970, 71 at a concert in Albany when I was opening for a lot of different people. And they bought my album, A Picture, and they still have it. And they somehow found me, of course, through the internet. And that album is still available too, people can find it. And they just said, "Hey, we love that album, and we're listening to your new stuff, but your first album is my favorite." It's like,
Yeah.
it's such a cool thing,
See,
how
that's
all that works.
right. It is, and that's where I found out about a
How
lot of.
did you find me? That's what I want to know. How did you find
Yeah.
me?
Rate your music. Do you know the website?
No, no.
It's where people with albums, the music that they've collected, they just post their reviews. They give it a rating, 4 stars, 3 stars, whatever. And a lot of them, I go through there, and you can look under the singer-songwriter, and they have all the genres.
But I'm curious that what was on there that inspired you to look me up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the tracks that I talked about,
Okay, all right.
there,
And those three are my favorite three. You picked my favorite three. Because
All right.
there's some ones that are not that great, of course, my first album. But those three, they hold up, I think. And I still occasionally do that song, Walls, which
Okay.
I wrote in 1969.
Mhm.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, yeah. It
That's
is.
so cool, man. Well, God bless you for
Well, God,
throwing the
too.
light on artists like myself.
Oh, that's what this is about too, That's what my channel's about. And it's never too late, you know. As long as we're, still alive and kicking, you'll find younger viewers or younger fans too.
Yeah.
You didn't think we'd like your music, and it's just exposure, a lot of it. And that's what this channel's about,
How did you
reaching.
come up with your name, the Bloom?
Oh, tending the pale bloom. Yeah. Thank you for asking about that. You're
Yeah.
only third or fourth person that's asked, but yeah, it's, just like a flower, that needs, nourishing, food, nutrients, exposure to the sun to grow.
Love, like
So
let
does
it
a
flow.
musician. So does a musician. So, a pale bloom, maybe they've seen better days, you know, a little pale, around the edges. So,
That's
so
great.
I'm there to, kind of water, nourish, give exposure. That's what I see as my mission, I guess.
Much respect to the
Uh,
archivists of the world. Much
okay.
respect, man, because you're you are archiving the lives of people who maybe otherwise nobody would ever know about them, and people can discover them whether they're here or whether they're gone. I think that's really cool.
And
Awesome.
yeah. And so anything else in closing? Did you any
I don't know if
uh,
you have any more questions. You know me, I just go on and on and on.
that's all right. That's all right. Did you want to
It's just never ending.
put
I did get invited. When I lived in Malibu, I became friends with one of my Malibu neighbors. Henry Louie was the fellow's name, and he was Joni Mitchell's producer, co-producer, engineer, and he invited me to a couple of Joni Mitchell sessions. Me and my then wife Carol, which was so beautiful. Joni Mitchell in session at A&M Studios. I just have to mention that it was one of the highlights, because I think she's an amazing artist, So that's just one other little story I wanted to get in there. Henry Louis was a great engineer, and he worked with her, and she's one of my favorite songwriters.
Me too. I
Uh
agree.
huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So God bless her. She's still around, and now she's getting the recognition that for so many years she felt like she didn't get. So it's really nice to see.
Very true. Very true.
That'll do it.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Alan. And I will give you this a link once I get it edited a little bit.
Great.
And then you can post it, like I said, and
Will do.
see what kind of reactions we get.
Awesome. Thanks so
All right.
much.
All right. Thank you too, Alan.
Aloha, Greg.
Yes. Aloha. Oi.
Oi. Take care, brother.